Hi, welcome back. And we are so excited that you are joining us here on our Real Self Care series. And today we have Sade joining us. And we're really excited to speak with her because she is a time management coach. And I'm just going to do it and speak for all moms and say that we need help with our time management because there's so much to do in a day and we all only have 24 hours a day. And I think we have to sleep at some point. So, really excited to learn more about you and thank you so much for joining us. So, would you mind giving us a little bit more background of how you found yourself in this position?
Yeah, of course. Hi, everyone. I'm Sade Kelly. Like Stephanie said, I'm a time management coach, which I had never heard of before I became a time management coach. Quick backstory, born and raised in New York City. I now live in Atlanta. I've been here for about 3.5 years. I started my career as an advertising executive. I thought that's what I always wanted to do. And I got into like one of the tough firms that was hard to get into in college. I thought I was doing the thing. And then about a year in, I was like, I'm not enjoying this. So I started side hustling like any other millennial would do. So I started a blog. I started hosting networking events. I started an e-commerce business. And none of those things ever really took off the way I wanted. Like none of them surpassed my income from my job. But at the same time, I was able to do my job, get promoted, do well there, and also have these multiple side businesses. So people started asking me, how are you managing all your time? How are you juggling all these businesses? And you still have a personal life and you seem to not be so stressed. Even though they didn't know I was burning out a lot in the beginning. But eventually I figured out how to manage my time really well because I leveraged my project management skills from work. And I started to use those to manage my own time and day because I was just like fed up. And then the more people asked me, the more I decided, you know what, I'm just going to do a workshop or something. I'm tired of people asking me. So I did the workshop, and each of my friends ended up saving like 4 more hours per day. So they were saving like 28 or like 30 hours in a week, enough to start their own side hustles. And that's when I had a business coach friend of mine say, like, this is something you could actually teach and do full time. And I was like, yeah, right. People don't want that. And I want to share this story because it was like crazy. I actually ended up posting about it to my Instagram story, and I had a decent following because I had a blog, just asking people if they'd be interested in this type of coaching. And I remember 10 people booked a call that week. So that already showed me there was a demand. And then long story short, like a couple months after that, maybe like 4 or 5 months after that, I decided to quit my job because I saw enough income coming in to make me feel confident to do it. And I've been doing this business almost 4 years now.
That's an inspiring
Congratulations.
story. Yeah.
Thank you.
I love that you take this, you look at it as a holistic approach of managing goals in every area of your life because it's
Mhm.
really difficult to compartmentalize all of these different aspects of our lives. And so looking at it as a whole
Mhm.
is, I think, really powerful.
Yeah, yeah, I didn't even mention that. I actually decided when I was going into this that I was going to help women not just manage their business or their work life, but we also had to learn how to manage their wellness, their self-care, and their relationships. Because without knowing how to manage that, you can never be as organized as you want in like your corporate or like your professional side of things. So I learned that when I was able to leverage both of those things, we could do it in a way where it was more peaceful. You didn't have to sacrifice your self-care, you didn't have to stress out. And I just love seeing like the joy from my clients when they're able to actually get their lives together. Because like you were saying in the beginning, so many of us, especially moms, feel like I'm never gonna have enough time in the day when in actuality, all we get is 24 hours. So we all have to learn how to maximize it. And it comes down to a couple different things that I'm sure we'll get into in this conversation.
And you're almost like adding time on because you're giving time back to people. You're finding it and
Yeah,
giving it back to them, right? It's almost like a savings with a high interest, right? You're like just here, devote some time and energy into figuring this out and you will get time back, right?
exactly. That's what I always say to people. I'm always like, you gain back. Most a majority of my clients gain back at least 4 hours in a day, and some of them gain back more. So it's like it feels like you're adding on like 30 hours in a week.
Just think of all the things that you could do. I mean, you
Yeah.
could apply it all to self-care, but this is why it's so important that we're
Mm-hmm.
talking to you today, is because self-care is so important to being able to prioritize our time, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, can you speak a little bit more on your experience with that, of when you were burning out, right? And realizing in the beginning when you're getting everything going and realizing that you needed to leverage some things, and self-care being one of them, in order to um, help with your productivity.
Yeah, so what I was doing, I guess I'm a classic high achieving woman. Um, I knew I wanted to do all the things, and I refused to not, because I had just heard, as many women have heard before, like the messages of you can't do it all. You know, you're not going to be able to manage it all. It's really hard being a mom or a wife or a career woman, whatever it is. And I just refused to make that my reality. So I was like, you know what? I believe I am above, like, you know, above average. I'm a superwoman, even though those are like toxic things to believe sometimes. And I just thought I could do everything. And no matter if I had to stay up late, wake up early, not go to the gym, skip a meal, like, you know, whatever it was, I was like, I'm going to make it happen. And then I realized I kept getting to the same spot. So, I mean, I'm sure people have related to this. Like, you feel like you're in this cycle where I'm getting all these things done, but I'm not really seeing the results I want. And then I feel the same way every Friday. Like, I just remember Fridays, like, and I laugh about it now, but my husband, he was my boyfriend at the time, and he was like, every Friday you're like crying. And it really was true. Like, I'd be in tears because I was so stressed, I was so tired, I was just like so fed up, and I had a bad attitude. Like, it just wasn't, I wasn't myself. And it was because I was neglecting other areas of my life. And that's when I realized, okay, I need to just, I remember I sat down, I think it was like a coffee shop or something on a weekend, because that's when I had the most time and space. And I just started writing out, okay, what needs to happen? What would this look like ideally? How can I map this out in a way that makes sense? And then the more I did that, the more I realized, okay, you need to sacrifice in some spaces. So I had to stop going to so many happy hours after work and start going to the gym, things of that nature, where I had to see, or I had to start working on my business every day in a small capacity versus trying to like work on it for hours every single day, because I was getting less sleep. And I actually started to see better results when I made those switches.
That sounds like what I'm trying to do right now, but like I feel like it's taking me years. Like you used to talk about sitting in a coffee shop and like on a weekend, and I'm like, I've been on this for like 3 years now, trying to I keep, but I think I overthink things, but then I had to give myself credit for, well, I'm trying things and I'm, you know, things don't work, and then I go back to the drawing board and I start. But any tips that you have to the things that are probably the most important things that you need to like nail down to get everything else to sort, because I know it's more than just, it's not just one thing that you can snap your finger and everything's better.
Yeah. So in terms of like how to balance all the different things, you mean?
Yeah, like what if you had to say, in order to find that balance, like what is the number one thing that helped you like start? Because I guess that's what I'm saying, is how do you even start? Because I start thinking about all the things and I get overwhelmed. I'm like, I don't even know where to start.
Yeah. So I always recommend starting with a brain dump. So you have, in order to get super intentional, you have to get it out of your head. Like I can't. There's so many women. I guess like I have countless stories of women I've talked to. They're like, everything's just in my head, and I kind of just act and do and react. And I'm just like, oh, that is why you're so overwhelmed. That is why you're saying you're anxious. That is why you're feeling stressed. That's why you may have like higher cholesterol, blood pressure, whatever. Like, because it, you know, it manifests in your body sometimes, but first thing I would do is like really brain dump it out, like, because you want to become self-aware, because you can't solve the challenge until you know what the challenge is. So I would first write out like what are all the areas of your life that you're juggling right now. So for me, typically what that would look like, or back then, or I guess kind of now, we'll talk about back then. What it looked like was pretty much I had my job, and then I had my business, multiple businesses, and then I had my personal life, like wanting to have time with friends and family. and then time for myself, and then also my wellness, because I was like on a really big health journey at that time. I was trying to lose 30 pounds, and I actually ended up doing it, so it was like great. But I ended up just figuring out, okay, those are the areas of your life, like work, wellness, relationships, and that's why I teach that now. Those are your main areas of your life. What needs to get done in those different areas of your life? So start really not only deciding what you want, but also looking at your patterns and actually what needs to happen and what tasks need to get done in each of those areas of your life. And if you're not aware of that, because sometimes I share this and people are like, well, I don't even know. I would just say audit yourself. And auditing literally is just like paying attention to what you're doing. So there's online tools you can use like Toggles and Sama, ClickUp, like they all track your time for you and you can put in what you're doing. Or get a sheet of paper. Like some of my clients, we just have a sheet of paper and we're like, all right, 10 o'clock we did this, at 11 o'clock we did this. And you start auditing your time over a course of like 5 days or a week. You start to see patterns and you start to see where your time is going. And then once you know where your time is going, then you can start figuring out, okay, how can I dedicate time to each of these areas that matter most to me? And then once you have that clear, you can start putting it into a schedule, which I really love time blocking. I love using like Google Calendar, putting it on the calendar, but you have to do it in a way that's not overbearing and overwhelming. So, what I see for a lot of people is that they time block, like, this is what I see all over YouTube, and it drives me nuts. And what? It's like these time blocks that are just like block, 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 like from like 7 a.m. to like 7. I'm like, who would want to live like that? That is just like, that's when people are like, oh, I can't follow my time blocks. They're too stringent. Things take me longer. I don't know how to move things around. I'll F this schedule. I don't want to do it anymore. Right? Yeah, exactly. So, what I recommend is instead start narrowing down your day into the top priorities. So, like for me, what literally just a simple structure anyone can use. Morning routine is the first thing, and I'm doing this because I'm like seeing the blocks. But morning routine would be first, and whatever your morning routine consists of. For me, mine consists of meditating for 10 minutes, journaling 10 minutes, reading 10 minutes. Like literally a 30-minute easy routine. And then I go, to the bathroom, get ready for the day, make my breakfast, start my work day. And then when I start my work day, it's what are the top 3 priorities that I can get done before like 12:30 is like the goal. Get those priorities done. So that way, no matter how the afternoon goes, no matter how many calls I have, no matter what comes up, I know those are covered. And then I have breaks in for meals, breaks in for my gym time, and then I may pick up on a couple things after meetings in the evenings before I wrap things up. And then I like to have free evenings as much as I can if I'm not coaching. And then I also like to have a nice wind down night routine where I can do something fun that I enjoy to just like relax myself, no matter what that is, and then go to bed by a decent time.
That's comforting. I think I'm on the right track.
Okay, good.
Well, I can see why you've been so successful in helping people because you have it nailed down. This is a lot of the stuff that we work with on our clients as well as not so much productivity, but of just figuring out what to do with their lives when they are
Hmm.
trying to remove alcohol, right? And
Hmm.
so it is very much like, okay, how are we going to manage in all these self-care things, right? Starting off
Hmm.
your day, you're meditating, you're journaling, and okay, those things might not be for everybody, but you're taking a moment to yourself before you're jumping into stuff, right?
Right. Hmm. That way you're proactive about your day instead of just reactive, rolling over. And you ever roll over and look at your phone? It's just like stresses you out. And no one should start their day with stress and anxiety. You want to start your day priming yourself for success for the day.
Yeah, and ending the day in the same way, right? Of
Yes.
winding down. I mean, for me in my experience, I would drink after my day. There was a lot tied into it of like it was my reward, it was how I got a boost
Hmm.
of energy, la la la, but it was also I really needed to just turn my brain off. I just wanted it to shut up, because it was still going, going, going from all the cortisol from the day before and just it's
Hmm.
a vicious cycle and actually finding an activity that helps you use your brain, but maybe in a different way, maybe doing a puzzle. Like I really liked
Hmm.
doing Sudoku
Oh yeah.
or doing like learning. practicing my Spanish, which is terrible. I'm not gonna, I won't try that, but just using your brain in a different way that's more like relaxed is a really nice way to wind down, because
Mm-hmm.
you want, like, I heard somebody say that they like to treat like going to bed as the start of their day, right? Of
Mm.
like, how do I want to start off my foot for the next day? I'm doing it right now by
Ooh.
preparing myself for sleep.
Yeah. I like that. I always say to my clients, plan your tomorrow today so you can go to sleep with a plan and wake up with a purpose. So that kind of sounds very similar, where it's like your day pretty much starts the night before. It doesn't start the morning of. Hmm.
I have so many questions. I won't go backwards though, but
Yes.
when you were talking about the time block, I did that exact thing where I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, I'm blocked, and I got so detailed because I was like, I have to make sure that I get everything written down or I'm gonna forget something. So I went so detailed, and that was so overwhelming. I couldn't keep track of it. I wasn't even looking at my calendar because I knew it was gonna be overwhelming to look at it. So I just wasn't even looking at it. And then I went and simplified it just like to blocks of time. Like I'm going to spend this time working on this area of work. I'm going to spend this time working on this area of
Hmm.
work. But I had to scale myself back, like stop trying to do 18 things a day, like focus on the three most important things of the day. That really did help, but it's really hard. So do you have advice for people on, because I know if you're like me, everything's important. Like everything is a priority. I cannot like narrow things down. So that's been the biggest challenge for me.
So, first thing, you can narrow things down. So, right, like a lot of this stuff, and I'm sure you guys are both coaches. So, like a lot of this starts with what you're telling yourself, because the beliefs and the thoughts that we keep telling ourselves is what translates into our behavior. And I had to learn this because I used to be a serial procrastinator. Like it was bad. And now I started identifying as a progressionist. And I noticed why I kept procrastinating is because I would tell myself I work better last minute. I just like to do things really, really perfect or whatever, because a lot of times perfectionism and procrastination kind of tie in together. So if you are someone where you're like, okay, I can't prioritize, everything's a priority, first remind yourself that like, everything is not a priority. Priority really should only mean one main thing that you're focusing on. And everything that's important is not urgent at the same time, right? So there's a difference between importance and urgency. So urgency is usually tied to time and has some type of deadline, yada yada. It probably could sometimes be done by someone else. Important things are somehow advantageous to whatever you're working on. So I like to call important things like the needle movers. So when things are important and both urgent, those are the things I plan in most. Like those are usually the first things I'll plan in a day. So like on a Monday, I like to first theme my days. So if you can do that, if you have the flexibility, I like to theme my days based on what I want to work on. So like maybe because I'm an online business owner, I'll have like an admin day, a content day, a finance day, like admin kind of thing. And then also I have more coaching focused days. So like you can do it like that if you like. But when you are selecting your priorities, you want to think about what's important and also urgent. Like it would need move the needle the most on Monday. And then do your best to just pick
It's
your
one of
top three and then cut off like the other two. So if you had to like only pick one thing, what would it be? And like really ask yourself, like, I have one thing I can pick. What is the one thing? Pick it and then let it go. Where people go wrong is they'll pick and they'll go, well, actually, I don't know. And then they overthink. And then they're like, yeah. And then they're like, well, actually, I feel like this. And then don't go based on your feelings. Just like pick the one thing, get that thing done, and then move on to like whatever that second thing was that you had on the list. And then move on to the third thing. And then if you can, move on to others, or those things go on to the next day. So it's going to come down to getting better at making really good decisions. And I think if you struggle with making decisions like I did for the longest, I actually had to realize that I had to accept that there really is no one perfect right decision, because we're searching for the perfect right decision, right? So if you go, I remember I'm going to butcher the quote, but essentially, there was this quote. I'll never forget it. I always have these odd stories of seeing quotes. But I was at the printer at my old job, and I was printing out these status sheets. And I looked up, and there was this quote I had never seen. Someone must have printed it and put it there. And it pretty much said, like, whether you go left or you go right, you always end up where you need to be. And I was like, so true. So like, why do we stress which decision to make? Because at the end of the day, there's already a plan for us in a journey that we're gonna go on anyway. Like, you ever make a left or a right on a GPS, and then it's gonna reroute you, right? So like things will get figured out. I think it's just gonna come down to deciding, taking the action instead of like sitting in the decision and the planning for too long. Is
Oh,
that
that's
helpful? Yeah.
yes, that's so true. All of that. And it's mindset
Mhm.
and a lot, it sounds like a lot of what you said, like with the coaching is what we do, starts with the awareness. Like
Yeah.
even like paying attention to what we're telling ourselves is really so important. Like, is that thing really that important? Like, do I really have to do the dishes right now? Or can those wait and make sure I get this thing that's done more? Like, and it had to bring awareness to what I was telling myself in order to start changing those thoughts. And like, the other thing is like, when we make these lists of 8 things to do and we don't reach them, then we're feeling more negative about ourselves. But if we make a goal that's more easy to attain, and we do more, then we're feeling
Hmm.
positive. Or if we only get the one thing done, at least that was the one thing on our list, and we can feel good about getting that done. Like
Yeah.
just looking at it from those two different lenses is a huge shift for, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, that's like the high achiever hack. Like that's what I usually call it because like only high achievers want to have everything checked off. So if we give ourselves less and do more, we'll always feel good about it. So yeah, that is so true, Jenny.
And you have to realize that there's never going to be an end to the stuff. Like
Yep.
you think you're going to get to the end of the list and you're going to have a relief. No, that's not how it works.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, I think if you, and then I think that's kind of like a part of life, right? Like we, I forgot, like, another quote I read. I don't remember exactly what it said, but essentially, as humans, we want to achieve things, and like we enjoy achieving throughout our lives. So like the list is supposed to grow.
Mm. Mm. That's a really interesting mind shift too. The list is supposed to grow versus I can never get to the end of my
Yeah,
list.
yeah.
That's
That's
like going on a journey versus running on a hamster wheel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Ooh, that was good.
and I love that you brought up perfectionism when you were speaking about how it really prevents us from being productive. And I
Mm-hmm.
know Jenny and I can both relate to this very much. So how do you best work with clients who have that tendency?
Oh, well, I understand them very well. So perfectionism really it keeps you in like this fear of judgment, fear of taking action, fear of getting things done correctly. And for clients like that, I like to just like what I call like poke the holes in it in those beliefs, kind of what we talked about, like questioning why don't you allow yourself to make mistakes? Like where did it come from that you think you need to get everything correct all the time? Otherwise you're less than, right? And for me, I can personally relate because it's so funny. I grew up being put into like these gifted and talented classes and stuff like that and like these special schools and stuff. So you would think, oh, like it wouldn't affect you negatively, but it did. And a lot of other people who've been through those things, it affects you really negatively because then you start to feel like my worth is tied to like how well I perform. And like if I don't perform really well, then I don't feel as worthy or like as seen or as heard as I would if I was performing really well. So for a lot of people like that who grew up in those certain like that certain way, I work with a lot of clients. I tend to attract like what I am or what I was. So I work with a lot of clients through that. And usually, like I said, we poke the holes in their beliefs. Like, where did that come from? Let's get it. And it's not like I'm a therapist, but a lot of times we do have to unpack like those things so we can understand where it came from. And then we focus on, all right, how can you let go of the idea that there's one way to do things? Like, can you just learn to make more mistakes? And that, one thing I remind my clients and even myself is like, failure and success are not opposites. Failure comes on the way to your journey to success. So if you start to see failure as like maybe a halfway point or a third way through point, you'll be more excited to fail faster so you can learn and get to the success. Because it's very rarely that you start at one thing, you're great at it, and then you just, end up a success without feeling or without feeling like you don't really know what you're doing, right? Another thing I help clients do is like lower the pressure they put on themselves. So one thing I did to get over this, and I encourage clients to do, is like seek no's, because I think sometimes that rejection piece can be really hard. And one thing I did is I did a challenge. It was like a 30 days, no, it was a 28-day challenge. I did it in February purposely because it's less days. But I did the challenge where I pretty much told myself, like, I'm going to do something scary every single day, something new, something that makes me uncomfortable, to get comfortable being uncomfortable. So I
Yeah.
always pose that to clients too. Like, start focusing on how can you like do things that make you feel uncomfortable, because then you'll get more comfortable at being uncomfortable, and then your perfectionism tendencies will tend to decrease over time.
We say that too, don't we? Get comfortable with discomfort. Like,
Mm-hmm.
because it's gonna be there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You got to lean into it, because that's I would argue with what keeps us stuck, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is even though we're in pain because we're overbooked, right? Our schedule is overwhelming. We're not achieving the things that we want to achieve. We're we're not being productive because perfectionism is holding us back. We would rather stay there. Our brains would rather stay there because it's comfortable and it's known, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because going into the unknown is very uncomfortable. So once you start getting more acquainted with the unknown, then you're able to sit in it.
And you feel more confident in that space. It's like for me in business, public speaking used to be so scary to me. But then I realized the more I did it, or the more I showed up on like Instagram Live, the better and easier it got. And like now I do it every single week, and it, doesn't, I mean, it's still sometimes scary, but at the same time, like I enjoy it way more because I've gotten confident and I've gotten enough reps in and practice. And if you feel prepared, if you're a perfectionist or a recovering perfectionist and you have practice under your wing, like you're gonna feel way more empowered because you feel prepared.
Mm.
And like the real practice instead of the trying to
Yeah.
go over it in your head enough times so
Yes.
you think you're prepared. That doesn't work. Like
Yeah.
actually going out and doing it, even falling on your face. I was the same way, terrified of speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And it was only like this year that I started to notice that I don't get that anxiety when I turn the camera on, or when like it
Mm-hmm.
just finally just kind of melted away. I almost didn't notice it the day that it actually stopped like coming up for me. But when I realized that, I was like, okay. And that only happens with getting the reps in and actually going and doing it. And it's like you said, we're saying earlier, like the over analyzing, overthinking, because we want to make the right decision. It's like, there is no right decision. You cannot possibly account for all the possible things that are going to get in the way between here and there. But if you can show yourself and look back at your life too and see, whatever happened, you figured it out. Like you figured
Mm.
yourself way out of every situation. So now you're paying attention to that, like watching the fact that, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to see what happens, and that you made it through it and you problem solved or whatever it was. And then that helps build that confidence too. So it's like less scary to make decisions when you're facing that discomfort.
Yeah, I love that. It reminds me of something I always remind myself, like, is this gonna matter when you're like 95? Like, are you gonna be proud that you did this thing, or are you gonna be, are you not? And if I'm gonna be proud, then no matter how scary it is, I'm like, I'm just gonna do it. I'm not gonna put too much pressure on myself. I'm not gonna take it too serious. I know what I'm good at. I'm gonna just be myself and serve. Like, I think too, like focusing on the meaning and what gifts and inspiration you have for the world is, it for me at least, like it motivates me a lot more than just trying to show up just to show up or to make money. Like I like to go, like, a lot of times I share vulnerable things online and my friends are always like, oh my god, like did you really just put that on Instagram? And I would write that email and I'm like, yeah, because for me it helps me to know, to just be transparent and to serve, and for people to relate to what I'm going through and to help others with what I'm going through instead of just harboring it for myself. So I know I took a bit of a turn, but like that pretty much is like really what helps me to kind of also get out of that perfectionism mindset. It's like you have something to share and we only have so much time here. Like, why don't you just share it?
Because if you don't, then other people don't know that there are other people going through that same thing. It's like it's people
Exactly.
like you that come out and share this stuff, and it's like how many people are sitting at home going, "Oh my god, everything you said, I related to." I'm like, I could totally relate to all of it. So there's other people out there that now they can feel seen because there's somebody else out there talking about it, and they're not so crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, how many people listening to this have a fear of failure, right?
Hmm.
Off. That was a big one for me that I'm still working through because even though like you work through, at least in my experience, you'll like work through some pieces of it and it's like peeling back an onion, right? Because oh, then it's going to show up over here, right?
Oh
And then
yeah.
you got to dig a little bit at that one. But I love that you give an opportunity to reframe what failure is because like you said, so many of us tie that to our identity
Hmm.
and our worth and our value. And that can all be reframed so
Hmm.
that you can, so in a way that can help you move forward. And that's really where coaching really, really helps people is because we all have blinders, right? We just
Yes.
do. It's just human. And so being able to work with somebody who shares their vulnerabilities like you do and reminds you that it's okay because hashtag human, right? Because we're just all human trying to figure it out.
Hmm.
And it will allow you to move forward in a different way, in a way that feels more aligned with you. And I love that too. What will this matter at 95? That's a great one.
It puts everything into perspective. It's like, girl, relax.
Do you find that like maybe this was true for you or maybe it's true for your clients too that like I think one of the things that in trying to overthink things I was always trying to think of the worst case scenario as if I think of the worst thing that can happen I can prepare for that and anything that happens will be better than that so I'll feel but that actually kept me stuck because like that just brought up more anxiety and like am I forgetting anything like what if something worked like that did not help but instead of in shifting that from thinking about what's the worst that can happen and trying to focus on the curiosity like I don't know what's going to happen like maybe I could just not try to predict what's going to happen focusing on it in a curious way instead of like trying to prepare I don't know there's a difference there between looking at
Hmm.
it and trying to be prepared and looking at it with curiosity but doing it that way has I haven't like let myself down but I don't have that pressure on.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree with that. It's like, I don't know if you've heard of the book, The Four Agreements. Yeah, he talks about like don't make assumptions. So if you live in a world where you're not making assumptions, you realize you're way more present. And a lot of that time when you're negative casting, that's kind of what I call it, is usually it's a trauma response. And that's what I've noticed because I've done, the work I'm sure like you all have done, like therapy and all the things. And I've had multiple coaches. And as I was training to be a coach, like it was something I covered. So I realized, okay, that's a trauma response because you've been triggered somehow. Usually, if you're going back to what's the worst case scenario. And I always make the joke that my whole family, like every woman in my family, my grandma, my mom, great grandma, aunts, everyone was warriors. Like, I mean, the worst warriors. And I just thought that was the way of life. Like, I just thought, oh, we just worry about everything. And then I ended up realizing, like, no, that's just, they're living in this anxious, negative space. And you don't have to use that's a choice. You don't have to live that way. So funny we bring this up because on my desk I have a post-it and it says, "What's the best case scenario?" And I look at that every day because it is a practice, right? I've been so trained and it's so ingrained in my genes, I feel like, to worry that I have to remind myself, like, what's the best case scenario? Like, don't make assumptions about what's going to happen tomorrow or even the next minute, but you can be present right now and you can do your best right now. I think that's another part of the four agreements. Like, do your best and don't make assumptions.
It's a big deal because I think that that trauma response is real. Like I was brought up the same way, like worry, 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 scarcity, like the world's
Mm-hmm.
gonna end, just be ready for it. And like that was a miserable way to live life. And the flip side is if you're looking there's always two sides to the coin. Like, so if you're looking at the positive side, like what's the best case scenario, at least that's like I think a better version of you is going to show up because you're not
Mhm.
weighed down by all the like the anxiety and the yeah, I remember what that feels like. I'm working towards, because I get pulled back in that old, because that's
Mhm.
default for me. So I'm trying to change that default, and that takes time and practice.
Yeah, yeah, same.
But if you pay attention to how it feels, like as you're going through the day and you notice that, like, I don't feel like that at the end of every day anymore. I don't feel like dread, or I don't feel like that. That's huge. You have to notice those. And it's at first it's little, but it builds on itself.
Yeah, and that's another really important part that I teach, or important point that I teach my clients when it comes to time management. It's like a lot of times you don't think you're making as much progress as you are, whether it's in your tasks or your mindset or your personal development, whatever it is, until you start reflecting on it and taking the time to like even just score your different areas of your life. Like I really like to just take some time at the end of each week, journal, and just like kind of score myself. Make it really easy because, if it's too complicated, no one will do it. But if you have the time set aside on your calendar, I just want to reflect on what's been going well, what could be going better, like what are some things I'm grateful for, what are some things I love about myself. Like I ask myself just simple questions. How would I rate where I'm at right now in this certain area? And I'm not expecting everywhere to be like, tens across the board. I've never had that. But the point is just to like measure out your progress and just see the ebbs and flows of like your mood and your progress over time. And then you start to notice patterns for yourself.
That's one of my wind down routines for the evening is practicing gratitude of, wow,
Yes.
like what went well today. And that's a huge shift from when I was drinking. And it was like all of the terrible things that happened today. And now I need to drink to numb them out.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to shift that into, wow, this was a really beautiful moment that I got to have today with my baby. Or I like love seeing the smile on my daughter's face, when she did this, and being able to switch it into gratitude is a much better way for me to wind down. So I would challenge anybody to try that as a way of reflecting, right? Of like, wow, yeah, like actually you did accomplish a lot today. You could even add in there, like, what did you accomplish today, instead of like that thought process that I would always have of like all the stuff that I didn't do that I was gonna have to do the next day and move it on to the next list,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like, no,
Mm-hmm.
what did you accomplish today? Oh my gosh, you kept children alive all day. They're fed, they
Yeah.
clean, you know what I mean? They feel loved. Like that's huge. Okay. Will I care about that when I'm 95? Yes. Will
Yeah.
I care about the dishes? No.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And like reflecting on those wins helps you kind of rewire your brain too, where you start to now seek like those positive wins and it keeps you in like cycle. So yeah, it's just really overall a great thing to do.
I love that you said that too, because that's what I've just noticed. I was gonna say, I just noticed that I went from focusing on all the things I didn't get done, which just felt like I was carrying more stuff into the next day. Whereas like recently I've started noticing that I'm like, well, I've been wanting to get this thing done forever and I got it done. So that's awesome. Like, so just a little shift of, and I still had a bunch of stuff on my list, but I was focused on the thing that I got done and that felt good. So the next day I'm not carrying a bunch of negativity into my day. I'm carrying more positivity. And then the next day I got more done. It's like that. It's just such a simple thing, but it's not always easy.
Oh yeah, definitely. And that's a lot of the simple things in life, right? They're not so easy. But it's those simple routines or like those simple processes that you have in your life that make the large impact. Like I always tell people, like especially my clients, I'm like, we tend to look at the large life moments and we make those to mean something more than they are versus like the micro moments every single day. Like how are you showing up every single day? How are you intentionally planning and executing every single day? Those moments is what's going to make up your life versus like the huge milestones along the way.
Mm.
Love that.
Yeah, I do. And that's really about focusing on the journey and not the destination. I know it's cliche, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
but it,
it's true.
it's true. And so, Sade, we've covered a lot of territory here and some great things to take away. Is there anything else that you really wanted to touch on while, we were here?
Um, I think we touched on a lot. I guess I could touch on like planning if you wanted me to touch on that. If that's I don't know if we got into like the tangible way. I think I kind of touched on that. But if you aren't already planning your days, I'm gonna, of course, I always say this on every interview I ever do. Please start planning your day. Start meeting with yourself. Like just put it on your calendar. Make it a non-negotiable meeting with yourself. And during that meeting with yourself, you're gonna reflect, like we talked about. You're going to plan out when you're going to have more time for self-care and like look for activities that you like to do. Cooking is something I never thought I would like, but as I've gotten older, I started to enjoy like I want to make things I've had at restaurants. Like it's become a whole hobby. And I also have really got into art again, which is something I liked as a kid, but then I stopped doing because someone told me I sucked and I like stopped doing it. But now I just do it for fun, and painting and coloring is like something I enjoy doing. So during that meeting with yourself, do some reflection, plan out some self-care, some things that fill up your cup, and also plan out your priorities and don't overload yourself. And if you keep consistently doing that on a weekly basis, I promise you'll see the biggest shifts. That's actually something that I implemented, and then I got tired of doing it alone, so I started offering it to my email list. And now, like every Sunday, and at like 2 o'clock, I'm sitting there and I'm planning my day, and like other women are on there on Zoom, and we're not talking, but we're all just there planning our days, and then we reflect a little bit at the end, and then we go off and do our days, and like it's just been a really nice way to make community. So even if you don't want to do it alone, like find some other people that can hold you accountable that you could do it with too.
I love that you said that because Jenny has a meeting scheduled for us to do that. It's like,
Nice.
she's like, it's just a work meeting. We're just doing stuff, but we're not talking. I'm like,
If only
okay.
you could get me to not talk, like that's the problem.
Have a meeting for yourself. I love this because I would have to make sure that when I was going into the office every day, like schedule in my walks, right? Like it
Mhm.
was on my calendar. That meant nobody could come bug me, right? And so when you block that time and say schedule a meeting for yourself, then it's not a non-negotiable. Then you're not being like, oh, well, somebody else needs this, right? And
Mhm.
so that's a huge tip. Thank you so much for
Yeah,
adding
of course.
And if you're just getting started, can I just recap like what we talked about with if you don't know where to start, doing the brain dump,
Mhm.
and then when you're setting that time aside with yourself to plan your day, you're looking at that list and being realistic, focusing on what is the most important things that you need to get done, but just pick 3 things or even less if you have to start. I know I had to start smaller because I kept trying to like, or I would do this thing where I would pick one thing, but I had like all these
All these
subcategories.
sub, yeah, that's where people run it. Like it has to be like a task, not like a project with multiple tasks. Yeah.
That's and I messed myself up doing that because then I'm still doing the same thing. I'm trying to like accomplish way more than or I'm telling my brain that if I don't get all this done, then I'm failing. Like the
Mm,
point is to help show yourself that you are getting things done more than you think you are, but you have to like s- bring the target closer. So focusing on just a couple of things at first really did help me too. And then I'm like just going back and like either adding to it or moving things around and not being afraid to like I don't have to get it perfect right away. Like we don't have to get the perfect schedule. That's where else I got stuck was thinking I had to get the perfect schedule figured out right now. And I'm still working on it and I just gave myself that permission to let it not be and it's going to keep changing cuz life keeps changing, right?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Well, and Sade, you have given everybody a free gift as well to help with people who are just getting started and just beginning or they're want to, up their game. And so, do you mind telling us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so it's my productive daily planner. It's a template. You literally just download it, and it is a PDF template of how to select priorities, have to like plan out your meals, have some time for gratitude, track your water, like because you should be drinking water. It's pretty much a template that shows you how to organize your day very simply.
Yes, please.
Yeah,
Thank
I'm gonna
you so
download
much.
that right now.
Yeah. And where can people find you for if they want to learn more about what you do or love your tools and want more?
So if you want more, we were just talking about this before this before this interview. I have a bunch of different tools and videos and masterclass and things of that nature on my Instagram. That's where I'm most active. I'm on all social media platforms, which I'm sure will be linked, but Instagram is like my main one, and you can find me at Sade, Sade Kelly _, and then you also can find me on my website, thefireinsidesade.com.
That's awesome. And we'll go ahead and link those in the notes as well.
Nice.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. There's so much to take away from this. So we'll take a break and try to wrap our heads around it. And I hope everybody joins us for our next guest, because this is a life conversation, right? This is pieces of it. This is how to manage your time so you can fit in all these other self-care tools. So thank you so much, Sade, for your time.
Thank you. This was really fun.